We're going to give a brief update on the CDRH quality pilot. And I say change up on the agenda. We're still going to totally talk about it, but I only have Cisco listed and not the folks that are really running the day-to-day stuff, and that's George and Kim. So I know many of you have heard about the pilot in different venues. We're just doing a very brief, quick update today, but excited to hear about the continued good progress of this initiative. So I'll turn it over to the three of you.
Yep, so is this my clicker here? Okay, very good. Yes, so today we're going to talk a little bit about the Medical Device Discovery Appraisal Program. That is one of the initiatives that has been running this year out of the Case for Quality. Really, I think the objective here is to give you a brief update as to where we are and where we're going with it. If you want all the nuts and bolts as to what's occurring in the program, you've never heard of it before, this is really not going to be the best presentation for it. You can contact Kim or myself. You can talk to us over lunch, and we'll set up time to get into the nuts and bolts of it. But really, we've been executing this program now for about a year, about 9 months since it's kicked off. And this is really just to give you an overview as to where we're at and where we're going. Is it that one? Which button do I push here?
The green one?
The green one?
No.
That one, okay.
Oh, whoops.
All right, that's fine. Okay, so far we have performed 14 appraisals. There's 28 enrolled organizations across 16 facilities. Our goal is to execute 30 appraisals in 2018. So we're well on target to do that. This has been small manufacturers, large manufacturers, international, domestic, contract sterilizers. We've had a pretty good range of enrollees thus far. So we're getting some really good representation. Our appraisals are being performed across 11 of the CMMI, that's the Capability Maturity Model integrated, 11 of the practice areas to what we call level 2 capabilities. Our appraisals are about a week in length with a team of 2 to 6, depending upon how the appraisal ends up getting scoped in terms of products and processes. For the most part, most of our appraisals are 2-people teams. And really, what's been exciting about this is while we're very versed in executing appraisals, because of this interaction with industry and agency and regulatory benefits being provided, and this entire shift in the mindset, from compliance to quality, we're making changes to the program throughout the year. So we're actively looking to learn from our participants, the industry participants, from the FDA, and make modifications throughout the program. So that's everything from very basic updates to templates and tools that are being used by our appraisers, and how they're providing the feedback back to the organizations and the agency, as well as the templates that the agency are using to provide the benefits. It's updates to our governance model, so we have regular communication mechanisms with the FDA, with the participants, with our appraisers, and connecting them so that we're also building a community. And another example of this is a mentor program, right? So that's a change that we've implemented. New organizations often coming in have this mentality of, oh my gosh, you're coming in for the appraisal. How can we really prepare for the appraisal? What do we have to have? And even though we'll say, you don't need to prepare, just describe to us how you do your work. We'll figure this out with you. And Kim will say it, and Cisco will say it. They're hearing it from us doesn't help. But when we pair them up with another organization that's already been through it. So an early organization like a Baxter reaching out then to a Asteris, and then Asteris reaching out to a Celanova, that helps to hear it from an industry participant to another industry participant. So we've built in this also as a change. So this is just an example of some of the changes that we've been building in. But the point here is that we are, throughout this program, this pilot, we are looking to actively learn and make changes into the program itself. Kim, do you want to speak to this one?
Sure, thank you. So what are participants saying about this program? So far, it's been overwhelmingly positive. You can see after every appraisal that we conduct, we send out a post-appraisal survey and ask some basic questions. Did you find this to be of value? How was your experience? Positive, negative, neutral? Did the appraisal identify ways that your company can make improvements to improve product quality? And you can see the results here from some of our initial survey respondents. You can see there's a quote here from one of the appraisal participants, and there are other outlets where some of the participants have spoken in more detail, some of the MDICX quarterly updates, which you can see on MDIC's website, where some of our participants speak in more detail about the experience that they had. I think we actually even have a couple representatives from participants here in the room that I'm sure you would be happy to speak with you about their experience. George, did you want to add anything?
Okay, so in addition to collecting anecdotal data like that, like what you just saw, and survey data, obviously now that we have a good number of appraisals under our belt, we're also collecting statistical data from the appraisals themselves, and we're using that to inform where we're going to take the program. So this is through about a dozen appraisals here, and in this case, we were looking at two practice areas. This is going to get a little engine room, but just bear with me for a moment. We were looking at technical solution and product integration. And that's essentially, in a nutshell, without going through the CMI training, that is, how do you take your requirements and develop that into a design and then create a product out of that, okay? So what you see here is a lot of green and yellow, mostly green. Well, so the hypothesis is green being, okay, they've met the intent of those level 2 practices in those process areas. So the question that we were asking our participants in the agency is, why are we doing particularly well in this area? Well, the hypothesis is that because this is an area that's already regulated, perhaps by 820.30 design controls, organizations are going to perform particularly well. So we asked the question, does it really make sense for us to assess this to level 2 organizations, or should we assess it to a higher level of capability? Should we push the bar on this a little bit further to see if your regulatory compliance is only good to that level 2 capability? Should we push you a little further into level 3 capabilities and see if you're going to get some value out of that to improve your quality? So there's one example of how we're taking the data and starting to turn the dials to help organizations on that. Anything to add?
Yeah, so, and I think the real benefit as we're starting to move through all this is these types of insights. I think you'll probably see the theme coming up even throughout the presentation, but as we discuss things, some of the changes that we've been trying to make, even with regards to the modified submissions at the agency, it's really about shifting our focus from, we're just going to review this one submission, this one product piece, to how do we start getting insight? How do we start knowing what's really happening across the spectrum? This gives us really good visibility, and you'll see it a little bit also in the next slide, where it provides a different perspective, right? Where's the opposite end of the spectrum that we're seeing things on, whereas our activities as a regulator need to be, or where as a collective, as a whole, industry ecosystem, everything else, do we need to start making changes in order to shift the dynamic? I think I heard it a little while ago, maybe it was Garth actually, who was mentioning the idea of, sometimes when you're moving, you've got to take on a little bit of compliance risk when you go to focus back on quality. This helps us start to see where maybe we might have an influence in that and where we might need to shift, because it isn't just the organization or the industry that needs to make the change, right? We have to be part of the process. We are part of the system. So if we're not making modifications, we're not allowing for things to happen the right way.
Cautionary note. Obviously, 12 people evaluated. These are 12 large industry. I'm not sure that the evaluation came across others.
So we are really well aware that this is representative of the first few, and because we've already even beginning with the participation in this, you've got to meet that compliance bar and that history. We've already predisposed to the people who at least know they're doing well and have things established, and we can move forward, right? But, and then maybe to Kristen's point earlier, right? That's the people who said, yeah, compliance is our bar. So now we're trying to move past and beyond this. And we'll talk about probably future steps as we go through the program, but we're well aware of that being the case.
maybe the opposite of technical solution product integration, where we saw a lot of strength, and I see some of our participants in the audience nodding. Another practice area we look at is estimation. And again, very quickly, this is how do you estimate and refine those estimates through your life cycle, the work that you're going to do. So what's the size of the work? What's the effort associated with it? The costs, the schedule, the people, the skill sets that are needed. And as you can see here, without getting into each of the specifics of the practices, you can see that we're seeing less capability here, to your point, Garth, with the first 12 that we were looking at. Now, why is that? Well, it's kind of interesting when you start to talk to these organizations, they don't necessarily line up from a procedural perspective on the estimation piece. Why is that? I would hypothesize in part maybe because they have not been driven to compliance from any regulatory perspective there yet. Now, is there value in it? Absolutely. What we hear from the participants is if we can better estimate, then we're going to perform better from a business perspective. That's going to help us with the availability of our products to the market. So these are just two examples of how, in addition to the anecdotal data that Kim spoke about, that we're starting to collect some of the actual practice data from this particular, these appraisals, and using that as individual feedback to each of the participants in terms of their journey, but then also looking at the collective and saying, is there something here that we can steer and make these appraisals more effective for you? Yep.
I support that because it's what we do, and it matters. It matters for our customers, for the patients that we serve, to raise that bar. The estimation piece is an interesting one. It would make us better at what we're doing, but is that the place where we really want to raise the bar?
So that's a great.
So my real question, I mean, it's my comment, is that how do we make that decision? We as a case for quality make that decision to amplify the efforts around design and just kind of work together to be better at estimation. Who makes that decision about what's important and how will that get done?
I was told you made that decision.
Well, if I get to make the decision, that's an easy one.
That's a great segue to this slide, which is where we're going. And we're very actively having conversations with the participants, with the agency. And the agency has sent actually several of their staff recently to become more versed in the model and to understand the practices so that they can be more informed in the conversation as to what areas do we want to get some additional feedback in. So it's the participants, the agency, and our appraisers to say, for a subsequent appraisal or where we take this program in 2019, what are the practice areas and to what particular levels of capability are going to be in the best interest to further drive the case for quality? So
Okay.
we're actively conversing on that.
Yeah, good. And I think that I have a say in that.
You
Because
do.
this is how I want to run my company. So, but I would also be very interested in the appraiser's opinion. Where has it mattered that for companies to excel in estimation, for instance? Has it mattered? Are they better companies? Are they top tier companies because they figured out how to do estimation in addition to all the other practices that we're assessing? So before we make those decisions, I'll start asking those questions of you because you have more experience in this than I have.
So I think, and I was fortunate to go through the training last week. So what it did do was start to drive all these connections and all these pieces, right? The estimation, while we think about it in terms of the estimation and planning, right? What I saw there was the connectedness that I've heard as a pain point, even within some of the manufacturers who participated last week and some of the ones who are doing it now. I think I saw Kristen demonstrate it a little while ago where quality sits across everything and touches everything. But in the med device space, it seems to be isolated. It seems to be this one standalone island that gets all the blame and has all the responsibility for all the issues and everything else that's going on at the organization. She gave a great example in terms of the accounting and financing, right? The upstream pieces, the value of what comes out of there, that output influences a lot of what's going on there. And that is a portion of what gets considered in that estimating and planning piece. So it is, and it's just something that we're learning too. It's where are all these really big connection points that we're not touching on yet that have a huge impact elsewhere that we've, you know, and it's no one's fault, no one's to blame here. It's the idea that we might have overemphasized one area, and then all these pieces that are critical to it, you know, we're not really putting the emphasis on, and that's what a lot of this is allowing us to really get some visibility into. Now, next focus phase for Case for Quality, are we going to say we're going to go ramp up estimation and planning? Maybe not. That's part of the discussion. Which is going to give us the biggest bang for the buck next round? And oftentimes, even from your standpoint as each individual manufacturers, you might have a different area that is more relevant to you, and that's part of what the approach allows you to really manage.
I want to just kind of keep us on track on time. We will have time to discuss this further in our closing panel this afternoon. We're going to talk about kind of how this all fits together. So I want to give you all a chance to wrap up and
That's a very polite, you're giving this to Hook. So yes, please. So we are working on what the appraisals would be looking like for a second appraisal and what appraisals would look like in 2019 to that particular question. We're working with our analytics team, which is also an output from the Case for Quality, to basically take those domains of quality, patient safety, effectiveness, reliability, availability, and more explicitly, more concretely tie the measures that an organization has in those areas, and pulling those out sometimes from an organization is challenging, to appraisal activity and how they're acting on those. And of course, wrapping up here, we are looking to execute these 30. That's the goal, one of the primary goals of the pilot here in 2018. And as well, wrap this with a white paper as to what did we learn from 2018 and what are our plans for taking this program forward in 2019. So just to stay on time, well, thank you, everybody. We'll be around over the lunch for any questions that you might have as well. Oh, and then additional information if you want, and then I'm going to let you speak to this next picture.
I'm going to ask Luann because one of the things that we're always tracking again is not just these survey results, right? But what are impact, benefits? What's the difference? What are you seeing as an organization? I think she's got a great example, an image very recently that I thought would be awesome to share.
Okay, so I happened to be in our Galway facility just last week, and Galway went through the CMMI thing a while ago. They love it. They love it. The plant manager came to me and said, I don't ever want to do an FDA inspection again. This was the best learning opportunity I have ever had. Please continue this program. Okay, so that's one thing. But he said, but would you come down to this thing, because we're in the middle of an MD-SAP, and I just want you to see the room. I want you to see the back room and say congratulations to them. Thanks for all the great work that you do. I was shocked when I walked into the back room. This is for MD-SAP, because everyone told me MD-SAP is a lot easier than FDA inspection. And we're all saying, no, it's not. But on the right is the back room. There are more than 75 people there. This is at 3 p.m. Friday at the tail end of the MD-SAP audit. Those people and many more had been there all week long. I estimate that that's probably $300,000 to $400,000 that we spent in that week alone for those people. That's just their salaries that I put in there. The lost time, the lost opportunity, because they all have day jobs, they do other stuff, is far greater. CAPAs are now a week behind, NCMRs are a week behind, everything's a week behind because they spent that time there. And I can tell you, we do this 52 times a year at Medtronic when we have FDA and MD-SAP inspections. And so on the left is CMMI. It is an empty conference room because we don't have a whole team of people strategizing and figuring out and printing documents and discussing defense strategies, et cetera. It's all about looking forward. It's all about showing how we do things. And in fact, CMMI spends a lot of time out on the manufacturing floor because that's where the work gets done. And it's not with all these people on the right. It's with operators, with leaders, with managers, et cetera. So the savings are clear in this particular thing. And we have to make this thing move forward. I thank you, Jeff, for allowing us this opportunity to try out the pilot. But we as industry need to figure out how to sustain that because the savings are clear. So thanks.
Thank you, Lauren.